Hello, this is Dr. Eric Bricker, and thank you for watching AHealthcareZ. Today's topic is healthcare innovation catch-22. How the best customers are also really the hardest to get. So what am I talking about here? So, employer-sponsored health plans in many ways are the ideal customers for healthcare innovation for a number of reasons. Let me explain. So one, employer-sponsored health plan, it's a huge market. So self-funded employer-sponsored health plans cover 100 million Americans. So it's a huge market, which is great. Then they bear risk. The employer-sponsored health plan, it bears risk. They're financially aligned with innovation, with improving quality, lowering costs, increasing access. Now, their sales cycle is reasonably short compared to, like, let's say the sales cycle to like the federal government, okay? So it's a reasonably accomplishable sales cycle, okay? Not all, but many of these self-funded employers, like, they can actually execute and implement and carry out the solution. And then they create a fantastic domino effect where once you knock down one employer-sponsored health plan, then you can knock down another, and 2 can knock down 4, and 4 can knock down 8, and 8 can knock down 16. So it creates this virtuous cycle of growth by working through employer-sponsored health plans. Now, what are some examples of this? So real healthcare innovation, whether you like it or not, was the consumer-directed health plan with the health savings account. And that was really spearheaded in the early 2000s by Definity and Luminos. And what did they do? They went after employer-sponsored health plans. Teladoc invented telemedicine. Like, Teladoc started before the iPhone was invented. That's why it's called Teladoc. They just used the telephone. There was no video. Like, they invented telemedicine. They sold to employer-sponsored health plans. Like, arguably, one of the most successful point solutions today is Hinge Health, which sells to employer-sponsored health plans. Hinge Health has a valuation of $6.2 billion. It's still a private company, but it's valued at $6.2 billion as of its most recent raise in 2021, right? So one might argue if a company is worth $6.2 billion, it's had a modicum of success. Okay, now, what are we trying to navigate here? We're trying to navigate the complex business-to-business sale, and that involves, at the employer-client side, selling to the head of benefits and the VP of HR. And so fine. So I've talked about in the first part about how these really are like the best customers, but they're also really hard because at the end of the day, the head of benefits and the VP of HR, and maybe to a certain extent the CFO, they all have career risk with this healthcare innovation, right? So when we're trying to persuade people, I think it was Ben Franklin who said, don't appeal to like rational logic, but rather appeal to interests. Appeal to the interests of the head of benefits. Appeal to the interests of the VP of HR. What are they interested in? They're highly interested in keeping their jobs, in career risk, independent of the quote-unquote rational, logical nature of your healthcare solution. And so I was in a meeting recently with a large self-funded employer. They have about 5,000 employees and close to 10,000 employees on the plan. And I'm sitting there and it's like, okay, they had the VP of HR and they had the head of benefits. They had some of the other benefits managers there. And then they had like the carrier representatives and they had the people from the benefits consulting firm, and like myself included, and like everybody at this meeting was old. I looked around, I'm like, where are the young people? Okay, listen, I'm 47, almost 48. I'm putting myself in the old camp. Now, I know a lot of people are like, oh, 47, that's not old. Let me tell you what old is. Listen, but by old, what I mean is like not young, okay? So the point is, nobody in that room was young. I mean, yeah, they were like middle-aged. So essentially, healthcare innovation, and this whole meeting, by the way, that I was in, was all about innovative solutions for this self-funded employer because they had $8 million of healthcare spend that they needed to eliminate in the next year as an edict from their CFO. And they were trying to figure out innovative ways to do that. Now, what's my point? My point is that healthcare innovation has to be sold by the old, okay? Because of this career risk thing. I don't think there's any way that the VP of HR and the head of benefits and these broker consultants, I don't think there's any way that they're going to buy from some young whippersnapper startup, innovation type person. Like, they're going to buy from somebody who's old, okay? So to kind of put some numbers around this, I specifically went on to LinkedIn and I looked at the regional VPs of sales specifically for Hinge Health, and I sampled 20 of them. And guess what? 13 out of the 20 of them are in their 40s or 50s. And the ones that are in their, the other 7 that are in their 30s, they're in their upper 30s. They like barely missed it. So old is necessary to get these self-funded employer clients, again, because you have to get over. Now, it's not the only thing that's going to help these people get over their career risk, but when they themselves are in their 40s and 50s, then they need to buy from somebody who's like in their 40s or 50s. And when I look at somebody who's in their 40s or 50s, like, I'm not trying to age discriminate or anything like that, but when I look at somebody in their 40s and 50s, I say to myself, they look expensive, okay? Salespeople in their 40s and 50s make a lot of money, if they're any good. I mean, you could hire a horrible salesperson in their 40s and 50s, but if you want to hire a competent salesperson in their 40s and 50s, guess what? They're super expensive. How expensive are they? Well, sales compensation is bundled in what is referred to as an OTE, right? On target earnings. It's essentially the base salary plus whatever commission bonus they get for their actual sales. And when you combine the base plus the bonus commission, that's their overall, their on target earnings when they hit their quota. Okay, so all salespeople are like, okay, well then what's my OTE if I hit my quota, right? And so I looked at the OTE for these 20 people, and I couldn't specifically find it for Hinge Health, but I could find it for all the jobs where they came from. And my guess is that where they came from and what Hinge Health was paying was probably pretty similar. And so, like, it was a little variable, but the average for all that, the OTE was $244,000 a year. It was almost $250,000 a year. And OTE for large enterprise sales, it's typically about 20 to 25% of the total revenue that the salesperson brings in every year, right? So financial projections people, they love round numbers. They probably gave each one of those regional vice presidents a sales quota of $1 million, which means that their OTE was about 244,000, or about 25% of that $1 million. Okay, what does that mean? That means you have to have a lot of money to sell healthcare innovation. Again, these employer-sponsored health plans are potentially the best customers, but they're hard to sell to because the buyers have tremendous career risk, because it's super hard to get another head of benefits or VP of HR job if you lose your job, right? It's super hard to get another one, especially locally. A lot of times you have to move and you got to uproot your family, and people don't want to do that. Okay, so it's hard to overcome this career risk, and then it's hard to have enough money to hire the salespeople to overcome this career risk. And so what does that mean? That means that really healthcare innovation is really the large venture capital investment world. That you really can't do healthcare innovation unless you get big checks in series A, B, C, D, E, maybe even F rounds of financing from very large venture capitalists. Because the venture capitalists they're the kingmakers. And listen, tons of healthcare entrepreneurs watch these videos, so I just want us all to understand the game that we're playing, okay? So the venture capitalists, when it comes to healthcare innovation, they're the kingmakers. And the kingmaker of all kingmakers is Bill Frist, okay? So Bill Frist, who was the former Senate Majority Leader when George W. Bush was president, he himself is a physician from Vanderbilt, and his family, the Frist family, founded Hospital Corporation of America. Okay, so he's not only incredibly politically connected, he is like part of like healthcare royalty in America, and he's used this position of power and wealth to then make kings of certain people to become successful healthcare entrepreneurs. What's an example of that? He was the kingmaker for Brad Smith, who is also from Tennessee, and Brad Smith's and Bill Frist's current company, CareBridge, like right off the bat, got huge investments from United, from Anthem, from Cigna, from Aetna, and they essentially, they were made king. It's like American Idol. If you win American Idol, then you will become famous. You will be able to be successful in your healthcare innovation. Okay, so fine. What does that mean? The vast majority of us are not like that. The vast majority of us are not going to be able to accomplish that. We at Compass didn't accomplish that. We were a largely bootstrapped business we just had some local investors, but that was it. No formal VCs. And so the implications, if you don't have a lot of money, essentially for the masses of healthcare innovation entrepreneurs is that you can't hire salespeople. The founder, him or herself, has to sell. It's the founder who sells. One, so you can't delegate the selling. Okay, you got to do it. You got to figure out a way to be successful at selling as a founder, and that's just part of the deal because you don't have the venture backing, you don't have American Idol, you don't have Bill Frist. That's what you got to do. Number two is you don't go for the large enterprise customers. Be like, okay, there's all these fantastic self-funded brand name Boeing and Disney and eBay and all these fantastic innovative healthcare companies, which is great. You're not even going to attempt to contact them. You don't want to contact them. What you want to do is you want to focus on mid-market employers with between like 200 and 2,000 employees. Okay, so essentially you're doing like off-Broadway. You're not doing Broadway. You're not even going to try for Broadway. You're going to just do off-Broadway. Okay, and you're going to be happy with that. And then thirdly is that you can't, as the sole founder, go out and like knock on every mid-market and self-funded employer door in America. Like that's too much territory for one person to cover. So you really have to define a niche. And that niche that you focus on either needs to be defined by a specific brokerage or consulting firm's book of business, or by a geographic location or territory, or by a specific industry. Now, specifically at Compass, we really focused on the geography of Dallas-Fort Worth because that's where we lived, okay? So it wasn't rocket science. It was just like, okay, I've got a car. I'm just gonna like drive around to like my little area, which, oh, by the way, at the time, DFW had like 6 million people, so it was big. But the point is that I didn't even try to get self-funded employers in Connecticut or in San Francisco or in Chicago or in Miami. Like I didn't even attempt that. Like all I did was look at my little Dallas-Fort Worth area that I could drive across in about an hour, hour and a half. And like, that's all I did. And so like innovation totally has a catch-22. You either need to raise gobs of money and have your solution be sold by the old, or you're going to do it with very little money and you're going to sell it to yourself to a mid-market niche. And that's my point for today. Thank you for watching AHealthcareZ.